So we're really pleased today that we've got Jenni joining us for our CYF podcast. Thanks so much, Jenni, for making the time. I wonder if you could just say a little bit about yourself and the work that you do and have done.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for inviting me on. It's really great to have this conversation. So my name is Jenni Osborn. I have been a youth worker working with young people for a very, very long time now, since I was a young person myself, and have latterly kind of moved into roles of supporting youth and children's workers, lots of whom are within a church, some of them are outside of the church. In the last year in particular, or a couple of years now, since lockdown actually started in lockdown, providing a kind of mentoring space, a practice supervision space for those children's and young people and families workers too, which has been great, and I'm really enjoying that sort of side of things. So yeah.
Wonderful. I know you've got a real heart for making sure that like CYF workers are supported in their role, and so this is obviously why you're doing the work that you're doing, which is really great. And obviously you get to meet quite a lot of CYF people, and I wonder if you kind of have recognised any trends that are happening amongst our CYF kind of people.
Yeah, I think I do see a lot of people, either those I'm working with directly, or people who I kind of come into contact with via conferences and stuff like that. And I think one of the big trends really is around exhaustion, how exhausting life is at the moment. And I think there's a lot of reasons behind that, and some of it is to do with perhaps a change in expectations. COVID has been really difficult, hasn't it, for a lot of our CYF workers, for a lot of people, for everybody. But I think there's been such a varied response across different churches and different organisations for those working with young people and children and families, that it's been a really difficult thing to try and find a common ground on. And I think that creates a kind of, oh, well, I've had to keep working, or I've been furloughed, or I've had this or that or the other. And I think that is still a kind of conversation that we need to keep having, really, a kind of a thing that we need to keep talking about a little bit. And I think also there's perhaps been a change of expectations now that we are past the kind of main, perhaps restricted time. I'm not going to say post-COVID, because we're not post-COVID yet. I don't know if we ever will be, really. But definitely things have changed from, we're not in the same kind of position as we were even a year ago in terms of restrictions being placed on us and all of that sort of stuff. But again, different people have got different approaches to that. And though the National Youth Agency has been trying to kind of put some things in place for those working with young people, it's not global, so actually there's a lot of questions, I think, over that. So there's a lot of tiredness, and I think that's one of the strands really of that. And then also one of the really interesting things I've come across, perhaps particularly for those who've been in the job a little bit longer and a little bit longer in the tooth, and that's around kind of wrestling with discovering that some of those I've come into contact with have discovered that they are neurodiverse. So coming across this sort of diagnosis of ADHD, for example, or even autism as well is another one. And lots of them are female, lots of them are those perhaps a similar age to myself, in our kind of 40s, maybe 30s and 40s. And we're just discovering, oh, okay, maybe my brain races, or my, this is why I do this, some of the things that I do, why I struggle with some of these things. So that's been really interesting.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I was just, as you were speaking, I was wondering, do you think it might be because actually as CYF workers ourselves, we're obviously really keen on inclusion, and we're learning much more about making our programs accessible and our relationships accessible, that actually with a bit of self-awareness, suddenly it's like, oh, that's also me. So do you mean as we discover about someone else, we learn about ourselves?
Oh yes, absolutely. And the inclusion kind of stuff seems to have ramped up a gear as well, I would say. There's been quite a lot in media, on social media, but also in other media as well, about late diagnoses, particularly if anybody watched the Paddy and Christine McGuinness program that was on earlier on in the year. I think that's been a big eye-opener actually for people to sort of kind of think to themselves, maybe there is. And definitely as CYF workers, we're looking at our young people, our children, our families, and kind of trying to work out how do we include this a wide range of different styles of learning, or different ways in which people interact and connect with each other, and we're starting to realize, some of this might be to do with something that the idea of neurodiversity is growing, I guess. We're becoming more and more aware of it, and definitely there's a way in which, as we think about our own young people and those we're in charge of, begin to recognize perhaps things in ourselves as well. I think that's definitely a thing.
And actually just language, because actually we would never be using like neurodiverse. That's become very popular, which is good in that sense of we now have a language for things which we maybe felt. So that's always helpful, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I think language plays a huge part, and it's been interesting to watch the rise of that kind of language, and people starting to use it for themselves and think, could this be me? Definitely. Yeah.
And also you commented like in terms of like maybe some of our church-based children's and youth workers and family workers, I really feel for them, because like in one sense the church that was going to do all things so differently has just pinged back to how it's always done things, it seems, in one level, and yet actually that's been quite tricky, I think, for the CYF workers, because one, we know there's a lack of understandably volunteers aren't coming back, and so actually they can't run things just as was, and that must be exhausting as well for them.
Absolutely. I think as you say that a couple of years ago everybody was kind of saying, let's not just rush back, let's make sure that we just come back to something that, or when we do come back, it's got to be to something that's more sustainable, that's not just the same old way we've been doing things all the time. And yet also at the same time people are really desperate to return to something that they find or they feel is normal, and so I think the different approaches, the fact that volunteers are even scarcer on the ground than they were beforehand, the fact that perhaps different churches have got different approaches to coming back, some kind of wanting, for example, to keep the face masks and keep a bit more distance, some not wanting to do that, and therefore there's a lot of discussion there about being sensitive to those who are more clinically vulnerable and all the rest of that. And that's it must be very kind of tiring, and adds a lot of pressure, I think, to our CYF workers.
There's lots to navigate. And I was also wondering, when we are up against it, when we are shattered, and when we'll actually, one of the things that it struggles is our imagination to see how things could be done differently. I mean, you can be, when everyone's got energy and they're all buzzing, you have loads of ideas, but when you're low, it's so hard to think of what could be possible.
And I think our CYF workers are absolutely the kings and queens, if you like, of creating something new. They're really often they're the ones who kind of can see things. If we just do it like this, then that's that'll be really great, and why do we have to keep doing it like this when I could see that there's a better way? And I think that can create in itself its own sort of exhaustion if you're butting up against it all the time. And then there's the kind of sense of, I've got nothing else to give here. I've reached the end of my creative tether. And that can be a very difficult place to sit in. Absolutely. So I mean, we obviously we could depress ourselves here with yes.
So but we know that we go through like the darker times or the valleys, or however we like to describe it in that way, and we know that God journeys with us in those times. Absolutely. And one of the reasons I wanted to chat with you, other than just because you're absolutely wonderful and I love to chat with you, is around support and what support might look like and what could it look like. And we know there's like a range of options out there for people to kind of engage with, and like peer support we know is really important as well. But I'd be really interested to hear some of your thoughts around what are some of the more like the scaffolding that we need around us to support us
sure. Well, I mean, I think that it's good if you've got good peer support, absolutely, and it's good if you've got support from people like you know, the sort of diocesan workers or the area. We're in the Baptist Union here, aren't we? So
association is what you're looking for.
It's the Baptist Association. Sorry,
it's all right.
So it's good if we've got people like yourself to help support the work that's going on. It's also good if you've got, you know, a good supportive team, actually, you know, people who might manage you directly within the church context, and then you might also have people within the church you're good friends with, who you can sort of sound off with if you needed to, and who would offer support in that kind of friend to friend basis. But then there are also lots and lots of options out there, actually, for things like coaching or mentoring or practice supervision for youth workers. I think it's been understood in industries like the counselling and the coaching industry for a long time that practice supervision is really important, because when you're dealing with vulnerable people in a counselling context, perhaps in particular, you need to be able to offload some of that to somebody who, you know, is slightly removed or, you know, higher up the chain, so to speak. And that's been a really key practice within that industry for a long time. But actually, now I think we're starting to look at this and go, there are a lot of other people in helping professions where the key component is help and support of other people. And as youth workers, children's workers, families workers, we are seeing more and more children and young people in our groups, in our area, in our communities, who are really needing a lot of extra support. And that falls quite heavily then on CYF worker who might be involved there. And so I would really, really strongly recommend, particularly if a person is struggling, but even if you're not, you know, even if at the moment what you're thinking is, I could just do with someone who understands this, but maybe isn't quite in my immediate circle of vicar, church leader, you know, line manager, if that's somebody different, or in the congregation of the church that I'm in, could do with somebody to offload to, or to just talk things through with, then actually one of these sort of kind of outside support is what I would really recommend. And you know, that's part of what I'm offering, so you know, it kind of goes with the territory, I guess.
I just want to check, have you got space in your books for more people at the moment?
I have some space in my books for more people, yes, not a lot, but enough to take on some more people. Yes, absolutely. Cool.
I thought that'd be hard for you to say that, but I was thinking no, and I think you've made a really very helpful distinction between, actually, obviously we all need to have a line manager, and that's important because they understand the day-to-day context, but then actually I think it's really important that we have someone outside of our context, and we did an employment guide which will be updated for the Baptist family, and in that it was around make sure you've got access to other support, and that actually we're saying to churches, make sure that you are willing to pay for that extra support. It should be part of the budget in terms of the support for the CYF worker.
Well, that's really great. It's good to hear that coming from the Baptist Association. Absolutely, I think that it's really important, and it's unfortunate when you have churches who haven't got that capability within their budgets really to stretch to it. So yes, it's good.
No, it is because and also I think obviously everyone's ministry looks different in that way, and I know that some of our ministers, preaching is their main kind of ministry and their main emphasis, but then for maybe CYF workers or other types of ministries or community ministers, actually they are working with people that whether that's like with domestic abuse families that are in those contexts, or refugees, like with what's all going on, that you, like you said, they're working with more complex needs, and so therefore definitely need that space to be able to touch base with some of that stuff in that way.
yeah, absolutely. And it needs to be, you need to be assured that you're coming, if you're going to do that. There are lots of us out there. There are lots of those of us who've been working with young people for a long time. We have been qualified youth workers ourselves. We've been working for churches or organisations that are youth work focused, and so we understand how that world works. And actually, that's an important part of need. I think from a CYF worker's point of view is, yes, somebody outside of your day-to-day context, who's not necessarily going to know all the ins and outs and who all the people are, but somebody who does really understand how the youth work world works, how the world of children's work works, and can give you that kind of that sense of reassurance, I suppose, but also encourage you to make changes where changes might be needed, or to seek out extra help with a particular situation, or how can you talk to your boss about this situation? It can be difficult to kind of put those things in ourselves, but actually when we talk it through with somebody else, that can be a really helpful space. So
definitely. So I had a thought then, but it's gone up my head straight away. Isn't that annoying when that happens?
Yes.
Oh, I know what it was. It was to do with, again, back to the language thing. Like when you talk with other CYF people, you're speaking the same language. Like that, you can do the shortcuts because you know that they get it. And our line manager, obviously, they're lovely and wonderful, but they don't always get it. So you find yourself having to explain because they just haven't quite got that same formation, have they, in that way?
Yeah. And also, I think, dare I say it, those who are in church leadership have an awful lot on their plates, and the youth and children's work might not be their top priority, whereas for all our CYF workers, the youth and children's work is their top priority, and that's the thing they're passionate about. So to talk to somebody else who is equally as passionate about seeing our young people and our children get the best support that they can is also a really helpful place to start from. We're starting on the same kind of with the same level of, no, we absolutely agree that our children and young people deserve the absolute best, and this is, we want to support you in order to try and make that happen, however that might happen.
So is it okay for me to ask, what support have you put in for yourself?
So I have a regular meeting with my coach, and he and I talk about different things to do with my work. We can sometimes talk about kind of my own personal stuff that I've been sort of wrestling with, that's the right phrase, in the last kind of year in particular. I found that really helpful to have somebody just to kind of who will listen and help me unpick some of that stuff that's really been kind of that I've been wrestling with in the last year. And he also helps me with kind of looking forwards as well, and what are we doing next? What's the next thing we're doing in terms of work? So that's been really good. I also have really good kind of local connections, good local support. I have church that I'm involved in. It's a really helpful support as well. So
so I just wanted to sort of let people know that it can be quite bespoke in the sense of you create what you need for yourself. So I've got two friends that we go on a retreat with once a year, but then we also touch base throughout. Actually, since COVID, like every other week now, we have a little Zoom together, and they're like my soul friends, I would say.
That's lovely.
In that way. And then obviously I've got my other sort of friends and things. And there was a season where I found spiritual direction really helpful. Like I feel like my spiritual director knew more about me than absolutely anyone other than God, really. And because we went on such a journey, I couldn't quite bring myself to, because when she moved, I couldn't bring myself to get another one. Do you know what I mean? When you just
of course. Definitely.
So now I have a supervisor, but I was very specific. It was like it needs to be somebody that understood the complex structures of our Baptist family. because of the work that I'm doing. I thought I can't be. It's just so someone just needs to be able to get that. And could weave God throughout it all was really important for me as well. So I think it's okay to think about actually what is it I require at this time. And
absolutely, and definitely if you're going to go for something that's got a coaching feel to it, then the coaching tends to be for something quite specific. So if you've got a particular I don't know, project that you want to get off the ground, or something very specific that you want to work through, then coaching is a really good kind of relationship in which to kind of have those conversations. Whereas the mentoring and the practice supervision is perhaps a little bit more free flowing, maybe we might say, and it is about sort of just the mentor listening in on what this person is saying, what the client is saying, how they are, whether they're struggling, what are the things that they seem to be really kind of coming back to again and again, and then working through that. It's not therapy. I do need to say that. Counselling is something different, and it all, obviously, it kind of all flows together in one sense. But there might be a recognition on the part of the mentor or the supervisor to say, I can't help you with this. You need to perhaps go and see somebody else who will give it a more of a specialist kind of approach to something or other. But mentoring can be a really valuable space for realizing, oh, okay, there's something that's not simply about work, or it's not simply about this situation or that relationship. It might be a bit more all-encompassing, and that could be quite a helpful sort of place to discover more about yourself, really.
Thank you so much, Jenny, for giving us your time, and I'll make sure that your details are at the bottom of the clip, so that if people can just click below and they can get a hold of you in that way.
That'd be fab. Yes, absolutely, that'd be great. I look forward to hearing from one or two people, perhaps. We'll see.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
Hi, Josh. I'm so pleased that you're able to join us. So we've just heard from Jenny, who has talked about the importance of support, and in particular, like for her, mentoring has been really crucial. Now, I know that she is your mentor, so I thought it'd be fascinating to hear what it's like for you to have experienced that, and maybe you could share a little bit, like, how's it helped your ministry? What's the difference has it made to you in your ministry?
Yeah, so Jenny's been my mentor now for about a year and a half. We've been meeting, and I've known Jenny for a long time, actually. So our relationship goes back quite a few years, which I think has helped our mentor and mentee relationship as well. But one of the main things that I find really important as part of this CPD for me is the support and feedback that I get from Jenny. So I always know that I can go to her with stuff that's come up in my in the youth ministry that I'm working in, things I'm not sure about. She's a really good sounding board for going to her with dilemmas and working out together what the steps forward might be. But mostly my confidence has grown in my abilities through working with her. So Jenny's actually enabled me to realise that I am good at what I do. I know that sounds like a bit like blowing your own trumpet, but if I had a trumpet, I would possibly blow down it lightly. But no, it's made me realise that I can trust my abilities, and that's actually really helped me drive forward with some of the projects that we're doing. So yeah, I would say boosting my confidence and my ability to trust my instincts has been really good. Also, there's been loads of like little developmental things which have helped me, sort of how I've been thinking about integrating some of our young adults into becoming young leaders. So some sort of strategy around that's been really helpful. And also, the other thing that I found really helpful is like monitoring my development. So going through things like appraisals. We did the Strength Finder, Tom Raff's Strength Finder course. And that really helped draw out what my strengths are, but also what my weak spots are and how I can work on developing those. So yeah, those have been the main aspects which I've found really helpful and have made a really big impact on my work. Yeah.
Cool. I really appreciate that, because I think often we think of mentoring, we can be mentored or coached in specific skills, but I think you named something about the confidence thing, that actually a lot of children's, youth and families workers we suffer from a lack of confidence, and people think we're loud and we're this and we're extroverts, and obviously youth work and children's workers come in all shapes and sizes, but often that kind of maybe that loudness actually does it kind of covers up a bit of an anxiety and a bit of a lack of confidence, and I mean, yeah, and people are quick to point out our failings and our faults. They're not also as quick to kind of build us up as well. So I think it's really wonderful that dynamic's there for you.
And I guess as well, one of the things I'm really grateful for is that I have an amazing team at our church to work with. Like, I have a great line manager and a great team around us and loads of great volunteers. But I appreciate that not everyone is in that situation. And I think having a mentor like Jenni or someone else is a really vital support network, because being a CYF worker can be really isolating and lonely at times, and you can feel like you're in the deep end with not many people around you who understand what it's like. But so having that person you can go to for that support, and often just a vent as well sometimes, is really helpful, really crucial I think it's a really crucial element for anyone who wants to be in ministry for a career or for a long time, is going to need that sort of support along the way, I think.
Yeah, and it's good that you've kind of articulated that actually your line management works really well. So is your minister your line manager?
Yeah, so my minister is Charlie is our senior minister, and he's my line manager, and we have meetings as our whole staff team. We meet every Tuesday, but also we have like an open door policy, so I can go to him whenever. But we also have more official sort of appraisals once a year, and yeah, I'm really lucky that I've got an amazing team to bounce off and to work with.
Yeah, no, I love that. But thank you for recognizing that that's not everybody's situation, or they're being managed by somebody that doesn't really know how to do it, and so they're being poorly managed, and that can be really difficult, isn't it? And actually a mentor can help you navigate that, and to put other things in place, or how you might help your manager manage you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. And I'm really interested to know, like, did you have this sort of relationship at the start of your youth work journey, or has it been something, when did you build it into your practice?
So meeting with a mentor, meeting with Jenni is something that's recently new for me, actually. So I've only been doing that in the past sort of year and a half. So when I first started, no, there wasn't anyone I met with. I sort of chatted to a few other youth workers who are doing the similar things, and we sort of supported each other. But there wasn't anyone I met with as a mentor for that sort of focused supervision period. There was a few other networks I was connected into which were really helpful. But yeah, this sort of, I guess one of the things that's really helpful is that it's very purposeful. It's like the time we spend together is very intentionally about our supervision, about how things are going for me and where we can think about improving things and stuff. So it's much more than just like a ad hoc sort of friendship. It's a very purposeful and I'm trying to think of the right word. Intentional. Yeah, it's very intentional.
I hate when the words just kind of escape us.
It just dropped from my mind. Yeah.
That's cool. What do you think? This is just me wondering, because I was thinking some people that are listening to this might not be employed, or they might not have that sort of, they're not being paid to do what they do kind of thing. So they're volunteers, they're part of a team, but they're really committed. What sort of support would you think might be helpful for them, or would this sort of mentoring relationship help for them? And do you think that's something the churches should be thinking about?
Yeah, so I recognise that not everyone. Yeah, I mean, volunteers are the heartbeat of all good youth work. So, and I feel like hopefully if you're a volunteer, you'll have someone who is steering, behind that, and someone who you can go to. So I feel like every volunteer should have that person in their youth work or children's work who they know they can go to chat things over with, and go to for that support and almost say that mentoring relationship as well. But I think churches absolutely should see it as a key part of their development for all of their staff, especially CYF workers. So I would really encourage church leaders to seriously consider putting that into their budget because at the end of the day, it comes down to the budget as well. But I think it's truly worth investing for the long term in CPD supervision.
Yeah, no, thank you.
It's also that for some people that might not be possible. So leaning on your team and having those networks of support around you. So it might be that if you haven't got access to that sort of mentor, then looking into your local, what are other youth workers in your area doing? Is there a network of support there already that you can tap into and get involved in? That's what I did when I first started. I found out that there was other local youth workers in my area who met together once a month. I sort of got in touch with them and started going along to that and just building those relationships.
Yeah, no, that's great. So everyone's context will be really different. So because I'm really aware that when I first started working for my local church, there was probably about 11, no, not when I first started, it was just myself, but probably within about 5-6 years, about 11 youth workers in our area, so we could all meet. And now it's reduced again, and there's probably only about 1 or 2, and so it kind of ebbs and flows, doesn't it? But so there's definitely your local ecumenical youth work, and actually maybe like those that are volunteers who haven't got a paid CYF worker, can they connect with the other churches so that actually there's much more of an ecumenical joint kind of support, and so there's not clashes, but they can really kind of complement each other in the youth work that they're doing. And then it could also be that we know that each association has a rep. So you're the rep for your association, which is SCBA. You're going to be getting our Joffs coming over soon, isn't it?
Yeah.
And obviously I'm with Southern Counties, but each association does have a rep. So it's like, yes, if you're, because this is going to be going out to our SCBA churches, and if you'd like some more support or like know where you can get it, or I'm happily have a chat, a conversation about that and point you in some great directions. Obviously, and Jenni is available too. So that's great. I didn't want to take much of your time, Josh. Thank you so much.
No, it's pleasure to me. And I'm a bit biased, but I would highly recommend Jenni, or I'd also highly recommend trying to find somewhere where you can find that support for yourself, because I really think it is vital for any sort of longevity in youth ministry or children's ministry. Yeah,
thank you.